And now for part 5 of my interview with CNN's foreign affairs correspondent, Jill Dougherty. I want to get back to this issue of women's rights because Nicholas Kristof from the New York Times recently wrote a piece saying that women's rights was the seminal issue of our generation.
I absolutely agree. Because if you look at so many issues that are going on in the world, food security, societies, economies of societies, education, wars, and violence, patterns of shifting populations, so many issues go back to the family and the ability of a woman to get an education and get a job, change her family or herself, and change the society. And when women are uneducated, held down, not allowed to have work or jobs, it destroys the society.
And it seems so common sense, the idea that half of a country's population is not working or not working at its full capacity or not getting an education. Of course that will affect an economy's GDP. It's so common sense, and yet it's surprising that for so many countries like Afghanistan, where young girls who want to go to school, there are incidents of acid being poured on their face. I mean, the most basic right to education is being denied frequently.
But people who do that, I think, are driven by very, very different things. They're driven by a philosophy, sometimes religious beliefs, and their ideas are very broad, morality, women should not be doing this, as opposed to very practical issues. So they're beyond thinking about the practical. They're on a completely different level, which is castigating, can be very cruel, and very theoretical.
Is there an area of the world that you feel the news media has not properly covered that should be covered?
Well, I think definitely parts of Africa, and I do think that Latin America is undercovered. It's amazing to me. I mean, it's right here in this hemisphere, but we deal with Latin America very simplistically, and there are amazing things that are going on in Latin America. Brazil, one great example. Brazil is changing. It's one of the leading developing countries and developed in the world right now. And so I would have to say, I think probably Latin America.
And why do you think that that's the case?
Because I think that traditionally we think, south of the border, it's really just part of our, North American approach, that nothing much happens down there, and, down there, that's even the phrase, down there, whereas there's a lot of stuff happening down there.
And now that you've had this personal epiphany about how life can sometimes be random and there are things, unfortunately, out of our control, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, I don't know. If talking about shelf life, like if I stick around in TV for a while, that would be great. I enjoy it. I would also like to move eventually, maybe getting into the next 5 to 10 years, I'd like to move into something that does exactly what we've been talking about, that communicates issues that do have to do with women and development around the world, that would give them some type of help people to understand what really is going on in different parts of the world that affects them and the world. It sounds very theoretical, but I think maybe organizations that deal in that area.
For youth or for adults or for society as a whole?
I think just women in general. Another big subject, I don't know, I am very interested in nuclear issues. I think it's one of the key issues of our lifetime. And so I think it's leading me into international organizations, maybe some, dare I say, think tanks that deal specifically with that, but getting out into the field. I feel very cooped up when I'm just sitting in Washington.
Do you think that with the election of President Barack Obama, that around the world we're seeing that people want this idea of change, that in many respects it is causing a progressive political movement in countries like Iran, where we saw people rise up in the streets, and particularly women protesters?
I do have the feeling, it's still early, but I do have the feeling that something has shifted, that the fact that he was elected against a lot of odds and against a lot of people who predicted that he would get elected, has changed the thinking. I've been talking to some Russians, for example, who really believed that there's a power structure in the United States that controls everything, and that there's no way that this guy Obama is going to become the president. And then when he was elected, they were really pretty surprised. So I do think that it's shifting people's thinking, that change is possible. Now, how it is manifested in the individual country or region is going to be different. I met a guy, in fact, in Iraq when I was in Baghdad, who he's an African, he's African descent, but living in Iraq, who wanted to run for office. And he took Barack Obama as an example for himself. And he wanted change. He wanted representation for black people in Iraq.
Do you think that the president's speech in Cairo a number of months ago really brought hope to many in the Muslim world who might have doubted the United States before?
I think to a certain extent it did. It shifted some minds. But the most important thing is not what happened that day, but what happens now and what happens a year from now. And people can be inspired, but you want to see action, and that's what we have to watch now. Will people actually see concrete action that will change things? And if they don't, they get disappointed. So now is the period that Barack Obama has to show that he can actually take the steps to change things, not just rhetorically talk about it, but really do something. And that's what people want to see.
So I take it from your comments that you feel that he has given a lot of speeches, which certainly has, whether it be on healthcare or international issues, but yet the idea of where the concrete policies are yet to be seen.
Yes, but I do believe, we cannot discount the importance of rallying people emotionally. I think that there is a period where you have to have the euphoria. You have to get people motivated and get them out there. And that period was very effectively done by President Obama. But now I think we're in the period where some of that is worn off, and the question is, what happens? Will there be health care? Will there be some type of agreement in the Middle East? These are the really tough issues. Are we going to see real action?